Right, brilliant. Hello, everybody. Got a lot of people still arriving, but welcome back from summer. Thanks very much for joining this AFN Network Plus webinar on de-risking the sustainable farming transition. We'll get into what this means in a little bit, but first let me introduce everybody. I'm Jess Fredenberg. I will be your chair today. I'm based at the School of Environmental Sciences at the University of East Anglia, where I'm the Knowledge Exchange Fellow for the AFN Network Plus. If you don't know AFN, this is your first time with us, then AFN is a UKRI funded project. We've got 3,000 members now around the country, and we're focused on how to transition the UK food system to one that is healthier, more resilient, and more sustainable, with a particular focus on net zero. Also with me is our project manager, John Haslam, and our co-lead, Neil Ward, also based at UEA, and John is at University of York. They will be keeping everything running nicely. Hopefully we'll be okay today. I seem to have woken up to tree surgery, both sides of the house, and someone also buffering bricks. So hopefully we'll be okay and there won't be too much noise interruptions. I'd also like to welcome our guests, Dr. Zainab Usman, a researcher at Rothamsted and one of our champions, Carolien Sampson, Head of Sustainable Banking at Oxbury Bank, and Doug Wanstall, a farmer in Kent and Head of Projects at Beyond Zero. So I'll introduce everyone properly before their presentations. What will happen is we'll have a short presentation from each of our speakers, followed by hopefully around 30 minutes for the audience Q&A. So today's topic, de-risking the sustainable farming transition. What can we do? So I think it's fair to say that farmers are under immense pressure at the moment. They're dealing with lots of uncertainty, whether that be climate changes, extreme weather, costs, farm gate prices, changes in government policy. Many do not have large reserves of money or perhaps emotional energy right now. In those circumstances, making changes to a business is pretty hard. It can feel risky, even if you know that it might be the best thing in the long run. So for many farmers, this feeling of risk can be enough to stop them taking that leap to make changes in their business for a more sustainable, resilient system. And in fact, the Soil Association Exchange last year found that 66% of farmers identified financial and business risks as barriers to transition. So it's a really big thing that we really need to kind of understand better. So our question today is, how do we remove this feeling of risk as much as possible and enable more farmers to kind of start that transition for their business for kind of long-term sustainability and resilience? I'm going to hand over to Doug in a second, who will talk us through this much more from his perspective as a farmer himself, but also as someone who coaches farmers in this transition. He'll be talking about mindset and other barriers as well as enablers. Then we'll be hearing from Zainab, who will share her research with us about collective insurance for farmers and whether that might be a good tool. Then we'll round off with Carolien, who will be talking about Oxbury Bank's development of a transition fund to, again, help with that transition. So Doug, if you'd like to get your slides ready, and I will just introduce you a little bit more. So like I said, Doug Wanstall is Head of Projects at Beyond Zero. He's also a mixed farmer based in Kent. Doug is an innovator and passionate about the reversal of climate change and biodiversity collapse. He led the development of the UK Carbon Code of Conduct, and he provides consultancy in transitioning businesses towards regenerative agriculture. So if you think of any questions as we go along, please put your questions in the Q&A box so that they're easy for me to find afterwards. Please save the chat for sharing of links, having a discussion, whatever else you want to do, but please put your questions in the Q&A box. And Doug, I will hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you today. So, yeah, my name is Doug Wanstall. I still identify as a farmer based just outside Ashford in Kent. Our farm, it's a mixed farm. We have arable crops, poultry, cattle, market garden. We have a black soldier fly larvae production system. working with a company called Inspro, and we do a lot of work with the University of Kent. What we're trying to do really is create here on our home farm is a knowledge transfer centre and a centre where we can not only build the evidence but also share that knowledge to farmers within our network. And I think a lot of people will agree that one of the things that's missing from the regenerative agricultural industry is evidence that what we do is leading to meaningful change. So for the last 10 years of my working career, I've focused on the development of a company called Beyond Zero and the UK Carbon Code. So Beyond Zero works with farmers and landowners across the country and even abroad to help them develop circular and regenerative systems and really work with them to ensure that they can not only develop those regenerative and restorative systems, but do so without risking a shock to their business. And we find that increasingly people are interested in what we do, mainly because of the reduction in the profitability of agriculture, certainly arable agriculture, over the last few years. So Beyond Zero really works with farmers and landowners across the country. And then we connect them with investors who either want to buy carbon offsets or invest in nature recovery in some other way. And we've developed 2 or 3 different models of investment within farms. So sorry, my slides aren't working. Here we go. So what are the barriers to a resilient and regenerative transition? Well, we talk about the 5 M's of change: mindset, 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 and mindset. It's obviously a lot more complicated than that, but mindset is the #1 barrier to change. It's the fear of change. So what causes this reticence to change? What are these barriers, and how can we break them down? So really, #1 is always business risk and fear of reducing real yields. Falling yields means falling net income, right? That's the question we always get asked. But no, not necessarily. That's just not true. If a transition is managed and carried out slowly, you have to earn the right to reduce tillage and reduce nitrogen and reduce input use. Don't expect to be able to do it on day one and see the same results. It takes time to build up soil biology and soil carbon or soil organic matter in order to get some of that free nitrogen that's above our heads. It takes time and effort, and it takes a bit of time to build up the right biology in one's soil. But what we always say is seek good advice, learn from experienced practitioners. It's really important to do that. So also, what's the other concern? Concern over what DEFRA will do next. We haven't got a clue what's coming out of DEFRA next. We've had problems with, BPS has been removed, stewardship grants, SFI, etc., get withdrawn almost at the drop of a hat. And that leads to really just people don't know what to do. They don't know what's coming next. And my advice really has always been, don't rely on them. Don't rely on DEFRA or any other government body to determine your future. Let's try and build businesses that are resilient, that can stand on their own 2 feet. Now, that's easier said than done, but it can indeed be done. So another barrier, we've seen our neighbours do it, or we've had a go, and you know what? Regenerative agriculture, it just doesn't work here. Well, one of the greatest regenerative practitioners was once asked, where is this here? Where is this here that regenerative agriculture won't work? And he said it's between the right ear and the left ear. It's mindset again. It can work everywhere. Regenerative practices can work everywhere, in every soil type, in every system. You just need to choose the right interventions for your system and your farm, and take really, really good sound advice. Finance. I can't borrow any more money, and carbon offsets are confusing. The industry is beset with acronyms and that people don't understand, and they don't really understand what the baseline requirements are to get involved with some of these carbon offsetting systems that exist. And actually, you can't borrow any money because the bank has said no, or there isn't the facility to do so. I'm not going to steal Carolien's thunder and talk any more about banking and finance, because she's the expert on that. But what we say is work with a recognised, transparent, certainly in terms of carbon offsetting and nature finance, work with recognised, transparent, high integrity systems that align with international standards, and that enables you to a system that enables you to work with long-term investors. What we will say is that if you can. This is the way our system works, and really, I'm not going to go through this entire system because there isn't enough time now. I'm very happy to follow up afterwards with people, but if you can sell a carbon offset to someone by filling in an online form, or a very simple process without anybody actually going onto your farm, or within a couple of hours, it's not a high integrity carbon offset, and it won't last for very much longer. So our system really is all about gathering really high integrity data. So we start by creating habitat baselines, and this is an example of Chapel Down, which is a big winery in Kent, where they asked us to work out a net zero journey for them. So we start by working out, what have we got now? What are the habitats that we have now? And where are the opportunities to connect those habitats, build on those habitats, and in fact develop new ones. We count all the trees on a site. This is all blue sky data. This is counts basically every tree over 3 meters in height, and the canopy size as well. And what this allows us to do is to look at, what are the opportunities for connectivity? Where can we add something like agroforestry, other woodland parcels, to connect habitats together to help create wildlife corridors, and of course remove more carbon. So we look at soil carbon. So the UK Carbon Code has developed a soils testing protocol. Now there's lots of academics in the room, and I'm not going to pretend that this is perfect, but if we want to make progress, we have to start somewhere. And so we've developed a soil testing protocol that takes 2 sample points made up of 16 points per point, and then consolidated into a set of results. And really what we're interested in is the total organic carbon stock per hectare, and then how we can influence that over time to increase it. And what we find is, once we get somebody on a true regenerative restorative journey, they never go backwards. So there's always the issue of permanence of soil carbon. I get that, I do understand it. But what we find is, when you start this regenerative journey, and when you start reducing costs elsewhere and seeing positive outcomes financially within your business, you never turn back. So we then do a full carbon audit, and this is the full audit. So this one actually we measure all scopes 1, 2, and 3 across all greenhouse gas types. Chapel Down is a big processing business, so in fact, they've got 1,508 tons to remove from their system before they get to net zero. And I should stress that under the UK Carbon Code system, you can only sell carbon offsets once your business has got beyond net zero themselves. That's not the incentive for these guys at Chapel Down. Their incentive is just to get them, just to reduce their emissions significantly over time. And we're helping them develop a roadmap to that net zero position. And really, it's all about getting stakeholders involved. So we're working with a Met Office, we're working with large corporations up and down the country. And really, the opportunity is to develop long-term relationships with these guys. So the Met Office have invested in 3 farms, 1 in the Lake District and 2 in Devon, where they are helping to finance the baselines. And then over time, they will then buy the offsets that are created by these businesses once they themselves have got beyond net zero. And what we've done is we've heavily engaged we've got heavy engagement between the Met Office and the farms themselves, and it's developing into a really good long-term, scalable and multipliable concept going forward. I think I've done my time, Jez.
Brilliant. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
That was really, really good. Great to hear your insights. And I'm sure we'll be coming back to you a lot on all of this. Zainab, if I can hand over to you, and if you're able to start getting your slides ready, that would be great. So Zainab Oyatan Osman is an AFN Year 3 champion for carbon financing, and she's a social scientist at Rothamsted's Net Zero and Resilient Farming Department. She's an agricultural economist with experience in applying behavioural approaches to designing mechanisms that can incentivize net zero innovations. So Zainab, if I can hand over to you, do you have slides, or do you have slides? Do you need to share them?
Yes, morning, Jess. Yes, I do have slides.
Zainab.
I'm
See
going to share
if they work okay.
Okay. All right, I think, can you see my slide now?
We can see them, but we can see your slides down the side as well. Are you able to press play? Perfect. Yeah,
this is perfect. Okay.
Over to you. Thanks, Zainab.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you once again, Jess, for this opportunity. So I'm glad once again to be able to share this project and, results and evidences from what we've done so far from collective farmer insurance, which is more like promoting a new form of insurance scheme for transitioning to net zero. So we are very much self-aware of the need to transition to net zero. And of course, we are very self-aware of how agriculture is contributing, accounting for 68% of nitrous oxide emission and 47% of methane emission. And we are aware of the need to move so fast as much as we can. But we cannot shy away from the fact that farms are open systems, and we need farmers to do a lot of some of these experiments, which we require, multiple neighboring farms. And we also should be aware that they have to take on multiple risks, and most especially, much of these farming practices, which are like regenerative farming, are quite inherently financial risk, which farmers must take. But how do we deal, with new models of insurance to tackle some of these multiple risks to be able to foster quick transition to net zero for the UK agri-food system? So it's quite very interesting that we've seen a great policy shift towards collective orientation. For example, since post-Brexit shift, we know that now in England, we have new policies, which is looking into a collective approach. For example, local nature recovery scheme and the landscape recovery scheme. We've seen that this is quite more different from the usual EU direct payment system, which only kind of supports landowners and large-scale farmers. But the British farming system supports small family farms, which we want to keep such tradition and also want to enable collectivity. For so many reasons, we understand that we need to work collectively. And we're having so many programs, kind of propping up to support collaborative farmer-led trials. But there are still some kind of gaps or disadvantages in this aspect, in that these programs yet do not have kind of insurance coverage that could fit into these new ideas and models. And there is also limited uptake of collaborative models which are still a bit individualized incentives based. But we need to move to systems that can allow for all not only for only multiple risk, and also look at taking into cognizance a lot of other form of practices and other form of challenges that could, to a very large extent, help us to transition quickly. So financial safety net as well for climate innovations. For example, some of these models have not so much incorporate much of these new farm practices that we want farmers to transition into. But, and also, most importantly, they do not adequately, account for a lot of all this risk. So one important study which we did, which was funded by the FN network, allows us to be able to look into different models, such as innovative insurance models, and also to look into how can we, come together to develop much of this type of models to be able to transition quickly to net zero. So it means that we would have to, do some testing, do some trials, but do we know if there is gap for this or what exactly is happening? So the idea stems from the fact that we are used to insurance in different aspects. For example, paying for insurance for a block of flat, but we try to see how this model could also apply to farms, because we know that farms work in an open system and the risk kind of spread as such, and risk are not individualized to one aspect of a farm. It's kind of spread across the food system as well. So there could be opportunity to bundle different risk and try to see if farmers could collectively, carry out experiment, knowing that there is an insurance, to cover for their losses. And I'm going to show you three types of models, which some of the models that we thought about while carrying out this research. For example, there could be a watershed scale collective insurance for farmers, where we have farmers on a landscape. We have, different farms, and we have flood-prone areas, for example, and we could have that farmers on these landscapes take up bundles of collective insurance coverage for flood risk, energy product at watershed scales. So it just means that farmers can work collectively as such. Then we can have examples in, this one is particularly relevant to catchment level areas for water companies especially. And for this case study, we did consult water companies for like the Portsmouth Water, and we understand that they wanted farmers along their catchment areas to take up, innovative farm practices that could reduce leaching. So we know that if we take up this kind of schemes, we have besides helping our agricultural system and reducing emissions, we will also have outcomes such as, water quality, which are quite very key to mainstream net zero goals in the UK. So we can have something like this where we have, upstream farmers. We know that downstream farmers here will feel the effect of nitrate leaching as much as the overall populace in terms of leaching into our water system. So if they take up innovative practices like fertilizer inhibitors, we know that for nitrate leaching flow could reduce, emissions could reduce, and we know that we could have good water quality. So these are examples of models. So we looked also at models that include livestock farming. So we know that reducing livestock is very key to one of the key strategies to reducing emission in the UK agri-food system. But then we are quite skeptical at how much this could, affect us. And we are not sure of it, but we need to start somewhere, like Doug said earlier. And the model here is that if farmers tend to, let's say, reduce their livestock and also incorporate some other activities like agroforestry, there could be collective insurance could work in a way that farmers could join, let's say, regional collective insurance program, where they know that they can, collectively fall on insurance in case of any form of loss. But we know if they are taking this at large scales, then it means that we can jointly move faster to, transition in the system. So these are examples of three models. So I'll try to elaborate on the livestock model case in which collective insurance can work. So if farmers jointly do this, for example, on a landscape, then it just means that risk like income loss and transition cost, climate impacts, all that multiple risks could be accounted for. And the premium is very important in terms of insurance. Premiums are put together, reducing individual cost. And, this we think is the catch if such products will exist. And so some of the consultation we did actually shows that there is a gap, and also it shows that people are already doing some collective, in small scales, for example, jointly taking up, pulling together their funding or taking up insurance for a special purpose vehicle. We also had examples of people jointly doing a lot of ecosystem services on their landscape, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 group of farmers. We have lots of cluster projects ongoing now in the UK, in England especially. And we have environmental farmers group, springing up to take up a lot of actions together. But we need to scale larger, and that's where this research is going in terms of how do we scale this. So quickly, we of course understand that we got some perceived risk and barriers. Of course, farmers will tell you, oh, this, we think there will be trust issues, we think there will be this problems of premium, what governance structure will actually work. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And from talking to expert and insurance company, there was a critical problems of pricing the risk. They said they couldn't place a price to the risk, and because there is lack of data in this aspect, we know we still have to do a lot of research, gathering data to be able to build such model. So there is lack of data to base this product on, and there is not enough information, and scalability is a big issue. So this is where we are thinking of how to bring together this kind of product to life, in terms that for scalability, it could actually work in terms of public-private partnership, where we have this kind of product model that instead of our current system, for example, the SFI is still very, very much individualized incentives. It's a good scheme, but we know that we should be moving more into collective actions and collective schemes that will help us to scale higher and bigger towards net zero. And one of it is that we need to work on our policy framework. This can work within the scheme, in that we can have the policy support guarantees for insurance premiums. We can have policy support for data infrastructure, largely on climate risk mapping, keying into different landscape structures. And by this way, we would try to bridge different types of gap, knowing that, okay, this landscape is prone to leaching, this landscape is mainly livestock and needs this type of system, this type of agri-food system approach. Then we can key into this beautiful imaginations that we have about net zero. Then the policy could also have a regulatory support for innovative insurance scheme, of course. So the private sector have a huge role to play. For example, the insurance companies and other actors like the water companies have a huge role to play in trying to tailor this kind of insurance scheme for different net zero farm practices, like I have mentioned in the different models that I showed. Then they need to build some kind of risk modeling tools, satellite data and all of that, claims. Then we could need the tech sector to help us build such product as well. Then the farmers in this aspect are able to, let's say, pool risk and premiums together, enabling them to, let's say, have a lower cost of insurance. Farmers already, they take out insurance anyways, but then it's now this kind of scheme or product keying into existing insurance scheme and helping them know, okay, look, you could have a lower premium scheme if you take this kind of insurance. It will cover more of your multiple risk. But so that's what such product is tending towards. And I think it's very interesting. And the farmlands are still very much individualized, but then we understand that we need collective support. So Jess, I wouldn't want to take so much time anymore. So I would say I will end up with saying that if we are thinking net zero, we need to think collectives. So thank you very much. So I'll stop here for now.
Brilliant. Thanks, Zainab. That was really interesting. Really interesting piece of research. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. So Carolien, can I hand over to you now? And I will introduce you. So Carolien Sampson is the head of sustainable banking at Oxbury Bank. She spent more than 2 decades in both commercial banking and development finance institutions in South Africa. She was instrumental in the launch of the Oxbury Transition Facility in 2025, so this year, which we will hear about, I'm sure. So, Carolien, would you like to take over?
Yes. Morning, everybody. I did not do slides, so you're going to have to put up with me talking. So I think, linking to what Doug said earlier, what we see as a financial institution is that farmers would very much want to transition, but there is quite a lot of uncertainty in that process. And so as a bank, what we had to think about was how do we support that decision-making process? I think just firstly, why we are as a financial institution interested in supporting farmers to transition would be to remind everybody that, so as the average loan term of our lending portfolio is 21 years at this point. And therefore, what we look at is to say, well, I need to have a farmer that I've financed be able to repay our loan over that very long period of time. And we know that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty into this future landscape, partly due to climate change, changes in weather patterns. We're already seeing those, but also in the changes that the supply chain is making in terms of demands on farmers to be able to provide data, provide information on their status regarding net zero. And so for us, there's a real risk that farmers would either get excluded from supply chains or not be able to get the kind of prices for their produce in future from the supply chain, but also that there's going to be a lot of pressure through weather changes on them. And therefore, we're not a philanthropic organization. As I remind everybody, we're a bank and would be able to repay us. So we can't predict the future, but what we can do, and that has been our philosophy, is to say, so it's in our interest at this point to identify farmers who are undertaking practices that will make them more resilient in future. That's all that we can do at this point. And so with our transition facility, we have brought that down to two very specific indicators that we're measuring. And those are the ability, well, does farmers have a carbon footprint? It's part of our evidence because it's that baseline that we need for supply chains, and it's how we're going to monitor progress over time. And then the second element that we look at is carbon stored in soil as a proxy indicator for soil health. We know that the theory is that farms that has higher levels of soil organic carbon will be able to absorb water better, withstand droughts better, and be able to cope with flooding better over time. And therefore, that's the indicator that we're looking for. We don't expect any of this to be a straight line exercise, and we look at change over time. In this case, it's more important for us to see that there's change, so that transition is occurring, than that there's a specific number that's being met. And so the question that we also get is, and that's been really difficult for financial institutions to get their heads around, we know that as farmers adopt these practices, Doug also spoke about it, there's this uncertainty about, is it going to change yield? Do they have to have higher costs initially to make these changes? There's all these kind of questions that arise, and it's really difficult for financial institutions to say, well, how are we going to model that to make a financing decision? And so we kept our transition facility really, really simple. I will post a link in the chat just now to all the underlying information. But effectively what we've said is we will support a farmer for up to 6 years with a working capital facility. They can draw it down, they can repay it. So for these fluctuations, they need money for the transition. It comes at a very low interest rate. We're putting this out at 1% over Bank of England rate. To give an idea, comparison, most farmers at the moment would be able to get that at about 2.5 to 3%, and a low admin fee. And all that we're asking from the farmers is to say, well, give us the evidence that you are starting to engage in sustainable practices. And one of the learnings that we've seen over this period has been that when you look at the literature, there's and general conversations, there's a perception that farmers aren't doing a lot. But because we're just asking, we're saying to farmers, yes, you have to give us evidence, but what are you doing? We're seeing a lot of change happening. Initially, because we do have a version of the product where if a farmer is thinking of making change but hasn't implemented anything, we'll support them for 2 years to think through that process. And we initially thought, well, we're going to see a lot of farmers who's in this thinking about making a change process, applying. But what we're seeing is by far the majority of our applications is farmers that have already made these changes. They're implementing. They know they have to change. And so it's just up to us to support them. The other thing that's been interesting is we don't want farmers to have to go through another bunch of admin to do this. And there's enough requests in the supply chain for farmers to give evidence. And so we've tailored our system of evidence gathering to say farmers can give us things that they've already done for other people. So we're not prescribing a specific carbon footprint. It's whatever you have already done. Only if you haven't done one forever, we have a link and we guide customers towards options. And the second one is evidence of sustainable practices. It could be anything from SFI agreements, participation in various supply chain programs that's paying for certain practices. Any of those things we're accepting. From our perspective, we then want ongoing monitoring on this. And what we're giving back to the customers in the process is we have partnered with Downforce Technologies to estimate soil organic carbon stored. It uses technology that allows us to give farmers a 7-year history of their process. And that becomes a really important tool for us to then start assessing and hopefully in time supporting customers to look at what a net zero pathway would look like. If anybody's interested, we've published a kind of case study on that in the dairy industry in our responsible impact report. I'll put a link to that in the chat as well. My main message around all of this has been there was a lot of talk for a very long time in the financial industry about how do we support farmers. And in the end, we went and said, well, let's just do something. This isn't perfect. This will change over time, but it has given us at least a first step into making some of this change. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carolien. Doug and Zainab, if you want to turn your cameras back on, and we will move into the Q&A session now. I can see lots of questions coming in to the Q&A box. Please keep adding them. I just wanted to kick off with something that I feel like you've just ended on, Carolien, and that Doug started with actually, and Zainab probably touched on as well, which is mindset. In the fact that it seems to me like it's not just farmer mindset that we're talking about here. We're also talking about all the the people who work in the industry, in banking, insurance, or whatever, who have the ability to create these sort of facilities, tools, whatever it is, to kind of unlock this transition and kind of make it easier for farmers. To what extent do you feel that mindset shift is happening in that area? Is Zainab, perhaps we can come to you first and sort of ask about how, when you're talking to insurance companies, you don't need to necessarily name who they are, but how open were they to this? Were they thinking about this in the way that the Oxbury Bank is thinking about it? And for example, how do you feel like that mindset shift has kind of started to happen in insurance?
Thank you, Jess. Yeah, I think so, because then when we talk to farmers as well, they did say and experts, they did say a lot of things when they talk about collectives. Insurance do come up when they talk about collectives. Then when we talk to insurance company, they said, oh, they've been in a situation to hear about collectives, but then they know there are some collectives ongoing, but they cannot see how to scale it in this aspect. So scalability is what they are key about, and there is no data to be able to price the risk at that point. So they talk about problems of data infrastructure to work for collectives at large scale. So they know they want the mindset, but there needs to be a large support for them to be able to do that. Yeah.
What's the data that they need?
For example, if you're working on a particular landscape, you could need not only data to measure the price, also data to measure the outcome or impact. For example, water quality data, spatial data, climate data, soil data for that particular landscape, for them to be able to price the risk, because insurance would want to be able to look at uncertainties of having or not having loss. So they need large data, which, let's say, water companies could key in on people, on also farmers meeting up, whatever they're supposed to meet up. What data do they use to measure the targets that farmers are aligning with, not with their policy, or something that could make up their policy? So they said they would need to build large scale data for different landscape, different for that, which they think it's not available, and there needs to be a lot of evidence for that.
Doug, what about you? Do you feel like the kind of, I guess, the infrastructure around farmers is starting to change? Like, where are there any kind of sticking points still in that sort of mindset?
Yeah, so for farmers, there is that.
Sorry, Zainab, that was to Doug.
Oh, not me. Okay, all
Don't
right.
worry.
No problem.
No problem. Yeah, look, I mean, there is definitely a change in the wind direction of the wind. You know, we're seeing, the agrochemical fertilizer companies all starting to look at alternatives and starting to change their language. But I don't think it's really happening enough. I was watching a YouTube video the other day from a fertilizer company who were absolutely focused on, nitrogen fertilizer feeds half the people in the world, and if we don't have that nitrogen fertilizer, half the people in the world will die. That was the dialogue they were using, which is frankly wrong and not helpful. So there is directional change. It's not fast enough. It's not quickly enough. We are seeing lots of other stakeholders, like insurance companies that we're working with, who are desperate to start investing in nature recovery. They've actually moved their direction, which is really good. Actually, not really focusing on carbon. Carbon was the big thing. We've got to get our carbon down to net zero. We do, absolutely. But what they're looking to do is to invest in nature recovery, in natural system recovery, that actually has a side benefit of also removing carbon from the system. So we're actually seeing a faster move in mindset from those that want to invest in nature recovery and systems recovery quicker than we are the farmers.
Brilliant, thank you. Carolien, do you have anything to add to this? I think it's quite interesting what you were saying about, you kind of just felt that you just sort of thought, right, let's just do something, let's get on with this. What do you feel there's a real reticence there in the industry in general? Those organizations that are able to kind of unlock things a bit, or how is that moving?
I think there's a willingness to try things and to do things, but it is really complex, and we're in a really, really lucky position. If I turn my computer, you can see our office at the back end, and as I tell people, we sit halfway between, like literally, as the sustainability team sit between our relationship managers and credit. They're both sides of us. So we're able to answer things, make decisions, and really work with the teams that need to do this very, very closely. And I think a lot of other institutions are that big. This is complex, and it's really, really hard, I think, sometimes to just bring all the pieces together. So we're seeing a lot of willingness, but really, really hard to get this to action.
Yeah, thank you. So message from, I'm just going to move to the Q&A now. Question from Jenna Hegarty. Thank you, Jenna. A question for Doug. Of the farm businesses using your commercial services, are they motivated initially more by potential cost savings / improved profitability of regen, or the potential for additional income through nature or carbon markets?
Goodness,
Maybe
everyone has
both.
different. Yeah, everybody has different incentives. I think now really the two get equal billing. Yes, they want to unlock new income, but they realize they have to transition their businesses and can see the change, the reduction in input use, the reduction in fuel use actually is is very leads to a very positive addition to their bottom line. So look, we very much focus on, adapt your farming practices. You will see changes to your bottom line. Again, the unlocking of the additional income is a nice to have once you've gone beyond that net zero status. But we're really about driving down emissions, driving down cost, driving down risk. And if they get to that point where they can sell some carbon, that is an added benefit.
There's another question that sort of, I guess, follows on from that a little bit, which is from someone called Sarah Davenport. Her question is more around carbon offsetting, but I think it can be sort of taken a bit more widely, really. She says, it sounds like a good way to access funds for those beginning the transition, but what about those already doing it already, or who are partway through? Are the mechanisms for that? What's the benefit? And I guess that sort of goes to everybody, really. Like, do we need like different mechanisms for people who are on different parts of that journey? Carolien, I don't know if you wanted to come to you, you must have ideas about, different customers on different points of that.
I think the one thing that we say to customers is that they have to establish their own net zero status before they can sell off anything. And in most cases, that means the customer have to be very far down their transition journey before they will have anything surplus that they can sell off. And so it does feel like a way to provide revenue. But customers need to first understand, and I know Doug will support me here, where they actually are in the position, because you could go and raise funding initially, but actually put yourself in a much worse position further down the line. I think the challenge that we see is that it is really hard to establish that baseline position, and that's why we're giving information back to customers and trying to help them to see that pathway.
Yeah. So question kind of following on from that, someone called Kenny is saying, sort of pointing out that we've got some very small farms in the UK, but we've got some very large farms. There's, a very large variety of farms. How do the models address this issue and ensure that no one is left behind? Zainab, I don't know if you want to take that. Is that something that that you sort of thought about in your research on collective insurance? How do you kind of work that in a landscape where you might have a very large estate and then smaller farmers, and how do you kind of balance that and share that risk in a kind of collective insurance situation?
Yeah, I would say, well, the basic purpose of collective is to share risk in anyways. And when we talk about collectives, from my own mindset is that we are thinking that small farms are not left out, which over the years, historically, we've seen that some subsidies have really not favored small farms in terms that it favors mostly large farms. So I think the models would of course look into how this would work. Since you're paying for insurance, I mean, I think insurance companies might have an idea on how to do that. So like I said, this is developing and it's looking at new funding to be able to experiment how this could work. So this idea is very much welcome on how it can work for everybody. So that's why it's a collective. So that's as much as I can answer it, because it's a developing model. So it'll be interesting to see how it works for all.
There's also a question from someone about the landscape recovery initiatives and whether collective insurance is something that's being looked at there. I don't know if you know whether that is something that's being sort of planned into it at all or looked at.
Yeah, for landscape recovery scheme, I think it's new and it's just oncoming. It's more the model is different from collective insurance in that we are looking at it as a proper insurance or proper product that could shift us away from mainly depending on subsidy, which we know overall cannot take us largely to where we want to be. So it's very different from that model, but it's a good start for the EMS program. And I think it should evolve into mainly public partnership where we do not really have to rely on on government moving everything, and how we want to much more put it in the heart of farmers to be able to work collectively. So I think collective insurance is working mainly to want something that is quite scalable and not localized, but then scalable across region. So I think it's a start, but it builds upon such models.
Yeah, and just continuing more with the collective aspect of things, I'd be interested to know what everyone thinks about, how important is kind of working collaboratively, across different farms and collectively. How important is that to the transition? And if it is important, then how do we? Again, that goes back to mindset, doesn't it? Traditionally, the UK has not sort of worked so collectively, I suppose, in the way if you compare to somewhere like France, if we're talking about farms. So if it is important, I mean, there are some great examples like the Green Farm Collective and people like that. But is that changing? How important is it? Doug, can we come back to you, because you're working with farmers all the time? How important do you think this kind of collaborative approach is? Is it something that's changing as we're moving towards more regenerative practices? If it needs to happen more and more widely beyond the people who are already converts or likely to be converts, then how does that start to shift?
Yeah, so to start with, look, all these baselines cost money, and the larger scale we go, the cheaper it gets, frankly. And so encouraging groups to work together is very positive. We're working with a number of clusters and nature recovery groups, and they're really important because you can look at, because not every farm. No farm is equal. Some farms can take lots of action and want to take lots of action. Some are in a catchment or in a cluster that are really productive really profitable, efficient food producing farms, and they need to keep doing that. But they might need some help from somebody else to help get to net zero. So we're working on a few schemes where we're helping to equalise the benefits across groups and clusters. Again, we keep coming back to it, but it is mindset. Farmers are notoriously bad at working together, but actually what we're seeing now is that slowly changing, and a little bit more cooperation. We've got large catchments, one particular large catchment where there's huge benefits to be had from rewiggling a river, but it takes, I think it's 5 different landowners to make it work. And so they're slowly coming together and realising, and they will collectively share the benefit from that scheme.
Thank you. Carolien, what about you? I mean, is this something that, would you see it as positive if some of your customers were to start sort of working more collaboratively on this transition? Is that something that then becomes more complicated, or is that something a bank would encourage? Is it helpful, do you think? Does it help with that sort of building of resilience in the long term?
I think it definitely helps. And I think we need to remember that change on one farm will have an impact on the neighbor. And so they do come together. So the more there is collaboration, the wider the impact will be. But it's not only the farmers. I think it's also up to the supply chain to get better at collective action. and coordinating their own actions. And I think we're seeing movement on that as well, to just try and get things a bit smoother for everybody. But yes, the impact will lie in larger groups doing things together.
So we're approaching the end. I just kind of wanted to ask one last question to you all. If you were talking to DEFRA and there happened to be some money available in a lovely sort of perhaps fancy land, but if there was a pot of money made available for de-risking things for farmers and really unlocking this change, what would you be saying to them would be the most effective and practical way of doing that? Zainab, can I come to you first?
Well, next week I'll be attending DEFRA carbon 7 project program.
There you go. There you go.
So yeah, I'll be happy to tell them there, of course, to trust me with some funding to try out collective insurance as a product, building the model to try it out. I think if we are thinking of, it's not going to be possible, but then we need to start something. So I'll tell them how important, collective is in driving a net zero agenda in the UK food system.
Mm-hmm. Doug, what about you? What would you be telling DEFRA? What's the most effective thing to unlock this de-risking?
Yeah, definitely investing in some sort of collective insurance system, similar to what they have in the States, where some of the risk is removed from productivity or from production. But really what we would like to see is the entire, and this won't be popular, but the entire SFI budget being put into creating baselines and starting the journey to that net zero position. And once we've got all farmers in that, once we've got all farmers properly baselined and on that journey to net zero, private capital will do all of the heavy lifting, because there's a lot more budget in the private sector than there ever will be in DEFRA, and we need to unlock it, and we can, and there is a system to do so.
Brilliant answer, thank you. Carolien, what about you?
I will support Doug in his quest there, but also, I mean, we've been saying that providing some kind of guarantee system to the financial institutions would enable all of us to scale transition finance and financing for things like landscape recovery projects, which we're limited in how we can apply our capital at the moment. But guarantees would enable all of us to do more, and will actually probably use less capital than a straight grant of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thank you all very much. We are running out of time, but yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Carolien. That was really interesting, actually, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface in this hour of this topic. It's a really big one to understand more about, I think. We will be we're recording this, obviously, so we'll be sending this video out if everyone wants to rewatch it. We'll also be writing it up with permission of our lovely panelists, and those key points that everyone has made. Please also take 3 minutes to rate this webinar. We'll put a link in the chat. AFN funding is due to end in December, so this will help us make a case for continued funding. So watch the space on that. Our next webinar will be in the second half of October, where we'll have Professors Tim Benton and Neil Ward presenting what AFN thinks needs to happen between now and 2050 to transition the UK food system to one that is more healthy, sustainable, and resilient. So please don't miss that. It's the culmination of 3 years of work by the network and 150 experts. So we will be presenting those findings and recommendations to government. So please watch out for that. I'll be emailing it out. So if you haven't signed up already to receive our emails, please do so. John is going to put the link in the chat if he hasn't already. But yeah, just to say thank you again, Doug. Thank you, Carolien. Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Really interesting. And let's all just please keep talking about all of this and trying to understand it better and keep unlocking change. So thank you all.